The only time I always raise my eyebrow is if I'm with somebody who's going to show me their awesome memory. And I'm like, yeah, I want this with this, but not that. And be sure to put this on the side and blah, blah, blah. And they're not writing anything down. That's where I'm always like, okay, if you get this wrong, I'm sending it back because that's just stupid. So.
Hey, and welcome to 5 Random Questions, the show where every question is an adventure. I'm your host, Danny Brown, and each week I'll be asking my guests 5 questions created by a random question generator. The guest has no idea what the questions are, and neither do I, which means this could go either way. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into this week's episode. Just a quick thing before I introduce this week's guest, I want to give a quick shout out and thanks to Benny Kint over in the US, who left a lovely review for the show on Apple Podcasts, saying it's a fun new show with a very affable and relatable host. Fun fact, when I shared that on Facebook, a lot of my friends used a laugh emoji, with some saying affable isn't a word they'd usually relate with me. So, of course, I'm now looking for new Facebook friends. If you do enjoy the show and want to leave a review like Benny, you can do so over at 5randomquestions.com/review, and I'll share that with my new friends. Now to this week's guest. Today's guest is Dave Jackson, who began podcasting in 2005 and launched the School of Podcasting. His School of Podcasting show has over 3 million downloads, and he's helped hundreds of people plan, launch, and grow their podcasts. He's the author of the book Profit From Your Podcast and is a featured speaker at events. In 2016, Dave joined Libsyn, the largest podcasting hosting company, as part of their tech support team, and in 2018, he was inducted into the Academy of Podcasters Hall of Fame. So, Dave, welcome to 5 Random Questions.
Danny, glad to be here, buddy.
Now, we're recording this on July 27, and I know on July 29, you start a new role. So I guess the bio will have to be updated a little bit there.
A little bit.
But I'm not going to tweak out the name of the company. Or
When does this come out?
This will come out at the end of August, early September.
Can you keep a secret, my friend?
I'm awesome at keeping secrets, and I will keep a secret in all seriousness, yeah.
I am going to be the head of podcasters at Podpage.
Oh, nice. Along with, that's Brennan, right?
Yeah.
Over at that suits you really well. I know you use Podpage for your site and you're always recommending them. That's an awesome connection there, mate.
Yeah. So that's, you're the only person I've told. And that's why I was like, hey, you know what? I trust Danny. He's not going to go run out. And we've got a whole big hoopla going on with James Cridlin, who's going to announce it. And then I announce it and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that's where I'll be.
I will definitely keep that a secret. I'm not going to jump onto Twitter after this recording and say, hey, by the way,
appreciate it.
NDA. Well, congratulations. That's awesome. And quickly as well, actually, how are your knees, Dave?
My knees, believe it or not, are almost healed, but it's weird because that was 23 days ago.
Oof.
And I think by the end of the weekend, because at this point, the scab on my right knee, which really took the biggest hit, is about as big as my pinky fingernail. So where it's almost to the point where like I'm really tempted to just grab the scab and yank it. But it's been a very long road because every day you wake up and you think it's healing and then you move and then you're like, oh, wait, look, it's not happy again. So, but I appreciate you asking.
And just for the listeners, Dave had a bit of an accident whilst walking and recording on your phone, if I recall.
Yeah, I was looking at my phone and it was raining. So I was trying to kind of walk fast to get home. And my neighborhood, the sidewalks are supposed to be flat and they're not. And this one had easily like a 2-inch gap. And so there was just like this little wall and my right leg just stopped dead. And I'm looking at my phone is in my right hand. And I noticed my left hand is going out to brace. And I'm like, why is it? And then about this is one of those things where like a million things go through your mind. I'm like, why is my left hand? Oh, I'm falling. And so I put my left hand out to brace. I flipped my phone. So I landed on my phone. So kudos to OtterBox because it didn't get a scratch. But the big problem was I just skidded on my knees. And I got up and all my neighbors, because this was on the 4th of July, and the reason I was out was to look at fireworks. So everybody's in their front yard, and they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, just embarrassed, thanks. And then I walked home. I was only like 3 houses from mine. I get in, and I turn on the kitchen light, and I've just got blood in my socks. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. And I look down, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that was not good. So, yeah, don't look at your phone while you're walking. That is the lesson I've learned. And what's funny is I didn't even realize until when I could finally walk without really causing all sorts of issues. I started walking. The first thing I did was pull out my phone. I was like, you idiot, don't do that. So now I'm developed a new habit of when I'm getting ready to leave the house, I figure out what podcast I'm going to listen to. and then put it in my pocket and continue on. Because I was like, I didn't realize that was a habit, and it's a bad habit to have.
And there was, I mean, the injuries, like you say, you had blood in your socks. Injuries were quite horrible. You shared some pictures of your knees online, and yeah, they were a bit of a mess, mate. So as you say, don't watch your phone when you're walking, and maybe wear pants made out of otter.
Yeah, that's it. Something. Yeah, it was the other thing. I normally don't wear shorts because I'll blind you with my legs. And, it was nighttime out and it was hot. It was July here in Ohio. And yeah, so nothing covering those. So that's what you get. So don't look at your phone.
Well, glad you're on the mend. And speaking of looking at your phone, if you're listening to this episode on your favourite podcast app, obviously check out the show notes afterwards because they'll have all of Dave's links that we'll share soon. But don't do that while you're walking. So, Dave, speaking of questions, then, how are we feeling for the 5 random questions?
I am, it's weird. I'm excited and yet I have no idea what's coming. So this could be, I'm like, all right, I got to think on my feet. So we'll see how this goes.
All righty, I'll try be gentle with you. Let's bring up the first question. All right, Dave, here we go. A nice easy one, I feel, but easy-ish to kick things off. Question 1. In what situation or place would you feel the most out of place in?
Boy, it's weird because it doesn't sound true. But I'll give you an example one. If I'm in a room of doctors and nurses, I used to be married to a nurse, and going to the yearly Christmas party where you just have zero in common with everybody, and they're all talking this medical language filled with jargon, and I was just like, I have nothing to bring to the table. And it was funny because my now ex-wife looked over at me. She said, "Oh, no, don't do it." And I go, "Don't do what?" She's like, "Don't be shy, Dave." She goes, "I don't like shy, Dave. Like, stay with me." And I'm like, I have no idea what you guys are talking about. So that's one where I was just like, why am I here? This is so weird. But just so it was a lot of, I guess, and this is what my husband looks like. I'm okay. Can we leave now? Like, I'm done.
And I mean, that's it. I mean, your ex-wife, which you mentioned, she doesn't like shy Dave. And, seeing you interact at conferences and, online when you're live streaming with Jim on your weekly show over on YouTube, etc., you always seem a very approachable person and happy to talk, happy to chingwa. But I guess, like anybody, if it's a topic that's completely out of your wheelhouse, it's kind of difficult. Are you introverted by nature, or are you pretty much extroverted, but it's just that topic that held you back there?
Yeah, my first job, I was a grocery bagger, stocker guy, and I got fired because I was too shy. I wouldn't talk to people. And there are times when it creeps in. I remember I was at an event and they had a dinner for the speakers. So I'm in a room filled with speakers, and if anybody needs a podcast, it's speakers. They know how to speak. Let's get them some exposure. And it was funny because I was sitting on this one bench and everybody else was kind of over by the food, and I'd gotten my food and walked away. And I was like, well, you idiot, you came here to find people who need a podcast, and they're all over there and you're way over here. And I just kind of had to manually kind of grab myself by the shirt and just go, and I just found somebody. I'm like, okay, see that woman over there with the green shirt? Yes. Okay. Can you walk over there and say, what brings you to the show? I'm like, yeah, I can do that. And I just did, but it was just one of those things where I look up and I'm like, oh, I'm being shy, Dave, again. I got to quit doing that. So yeah, it's something I easily fall into. And that's, especially I'm getting ready to go to an event. And over the years, I've met a lot of people. So usually I can walk into a room and know somebody. And when I walk in and know nobody, that's when I'm like, oh, here we go again. And again, it's just a matter of like, can you go to that person and say, what brings you to the show? And I'm like, yes, I can do that. Okay, well, that's where we're going to start.
It's interesting. I find a lot of podcasters, at least ones I know, are introverted by nature. I'm an introvert, and Podcast Movement was my first one last year in Denver. And some of the networking events I felt really uncomfortable at. I know I had to be there and network and get to know people, but it just felt really weird and strange, which my wife says it all the time, but you talk to people all the time via your podcast. But yeah, they're not in front of me. So there's a bit of difference than a human being being stood a foot away from you.
Yeah, and when I lost my job as a teenager, that was through a school program. And so the teacher that got me the job said, well, what I want you to do in the future is if you act the way you want to be, someday you will be the way you act, which we now just call fake it till you make it. And he pointed at my best friend who was super outgoing. He's like, you need to be more like your buddy Scott. And I'm like, you're asking me to grow a third arm. That's just not me. And he's like, just act that way. And so in those situations, I just kind of like, all right, what would an outgoing person do? And I just kind of, not so much like a persona, but I just like, okay, this isn't, nobody's going to punch you in the face. So let's go see what happens. And eventually, once I get going, the thought is more frightening than the actual act. Once I go and start talking to people, I'm fine. But it's that whole like, oh, I don't know anybody, and I'm going to look stupid or sound stupid. And I've come to the conclusion I'm not going to look or sound stupid unless I'm in a room of doctors and nurses. But that rarely happens. So yeah, I'm getting much better at it.
Well, you can always ask them what their favorite medical podcast is.
Yeah, there you go.
So there you go, folks. If you don't want to act stupid, just ask yourself, what would Dave do? There's your new mantra for moving forward. And speaking of moving forward, let's see what question number 2 has for us. Ooh, okay. Question 2, Dave. If you inherited a private jet from a stranger, what would you do with it?
There's a lot of countries. The only country I've ever been to outside of the U.S. is I've been to London once, and I've been to Australia. So there's Ireland and Scotland. And when I see pictures of them, I'm like, oh, I got to see those. And there are a lot of places like I've never seen the Grand Canyon. I've never seen really like whatever it is, the Pacific Coast Highway. It looks like fun, So I think I just go around and see the world for me, just to. It's one thing to see the pictures. It's another thing when you're looking at it. That'd be my quest, I guess.
And would you have a bucket list? So you mentioned obviously some countries there. Do you have like a top 10 that you could ring off right away that you would say, yeah, these would be my 10 I'd immediately go to?
Yeah, well, Ireland, Scotland, Japan is amazing. I know people that have gone over there, and they're like years ahead of everybody when it comes to technology. So I'd definitely do that. I'd like to see China. You can't go there now, but there are great things in Russia and Romania that would be interesting. Let me think, what other countries are we missing? Never been to Canada. So actually I have. I've been to Niagara Falls, but that's just putting your toe over the line. And that's got amazing, forests and trees and parks and all that kind of, because it's huge. So I definitely got to go to Canada. And what else am I missing? Africa would be fun. That would be... I know people that have gone to Africa and have seen the poorest areas, and they say it's life-changing. Like, because you don't realize how good you have it until you see somebody who has nothing. And so that would, as much as that sounds depressing, that would be something that would be interesting to see. But just basically hit all the continents, I think would be, and Germany. I've never been to Germany, so there's another one. So just all the places you've heard of. Let's fire up the jet, and here's where we're going to go.
Just grab an atlas and spin it around and see where
That's it. Put your finger on it. I've never been to Italy. I've never been to Rome. So I've never been to Egypt. So all those places.
It's funny you mentioned Canada. And if you ever do come over Canada, give me a shout. I'll be sure to, be a nice host for you. But one of the things I always found weird is like I moved from the UK to Canada back in 2006. And you mentioned the size of it. I was blown away. I didn't realize how big Canada was. If I was driving in the UK and I drove for 9 hours, I would be able to go from the tip of Scotland to the very southerly tip of England in that 9 hours. If I drive in Canada for 9 hours, I'm still in Ontario. I've not left the province that I live in, which is, to me, it's crazy, that the amount of space that a country can have.
I'm in Ohio, and it takes me 4 hours to get out of Ohio, and then I can drive through West Virginia and Tennessee and all this stuff. And one time I went to see some friends in Texas, and I went from Houston, Texas to Fort Worth, and it was 6 hours. And I'm like, how long? And they're like, oh yeah, we're not even, we're still in the same state. So Texas is ginormous. And like you said, Canada is huge. And it's one of those things you see it on a map, but when you're there, you're like, oh, I didn't realize that's hours and hours and hours. So yeah.
And just a quick bonus question for this one. Who would you take? You're not allowed to take the obvious. So you can't take a partner, for example. So who would you take on a private jet? If you can only take one person to share these experiences with you.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Because on one hand, it'd be my brother. My brother and I are, people look at us and go, why you guys look like brothers? I'm like, yeah, we are. And we have the same sense of humor and that whole 9 yards. But that means I got to pull him away from both of the people I would take are married. So that's the tricky part. So probably my brother. And if not him, I would say, I have a friend of mine that I've known since I was 11. So that's over 40 years. And it's one of those things where he was in the military for a while, so we kind of lost touch. But anytime we do touch base, you just pick up right where you left off. And he also, like my brother, has the same warped sense of humor that I have. So, and just all the inside jokes and things like that come along. So that'd be one of those two is coming with me, and their wives are just going to be not happy that they're not invited. So I can only take one.
They can maybe get the jet for weekends or something.
Yeah, there you go.
And yeah, I could imagine, for doing something like that and going, traveling to so many places, having someone that's got a funny sense of humor would be a boon for sure.
Yeah, my buddy and I we've been in bands together and things like that. One of our favorite things to do is just people watch and just like, what is that, kind of thing. So would that be, either one would be a good time.
Nice. So there you go, listeners. If anybody's got a private jet just hanging about doing nothing, we know someone that will take off your hands for a little bit. So all inquiries to Dave Jackson. Let's have a look at question number 3. So I know you must stay at hotels because you go to quite a few events, etc. So question 3, Dave, what's the wildest thing you've ever done in a hotel room?
It was in New York City, and I was going to be part of a webinar for Libsyn, and the hotel didn't have great lighting. A lot of the lighting was in the ceiling, those little cans that are very, it's almost like a spotlight. And I couldn't really find a place where I could sit and be lit. And I was like, And so, because most of the time I'm not in the hotel room. I'm out talking to people and I sleep in the hotel room. But in this case, I ended up doing a webinar from the bathtub. I was sitting in the bathtub, and they had this thing that kind of went across the bathtub to put your soap and whatever else you're going to do. And that just worked perfect to put a laptop on. And so I did this. Now, it wasn't the best for acoustics because it's a bathroom, but the other ones, it was super dark, and we just couldn't find a light that it either looked like I was being interrogated because there's this light flashing on my face and nothing else. And so I ended up doing it from the bathroom just because it looked the best, but it didn't sound the best. So that's probably the wildest thing. Other than that, I really, the only thing I do in hotel rooms is sleep.
So there's no, you don't take any instruments with you and, relive your Who or a Beatles moment or anything?
No, I mean, the only thing I can think of when I was 15, I went with my brother to this touristy thing called Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. And I remember we're both like, because he was, I think, 18 at the time. And let's see, if I was 15, he's 22. And we're like, hey, we're not at home. We can jump on the bed. And so here are these, stupid teenagers and young men jumping on the bed like there's no tomorrow. And we have a picture somewhere of that where my brother's like midair, and I took a picture of him. But other than that, I just sleep in hotels. So.
And for that webinar then, so it was for Libsyn, so I'd imagine there'd be a few people on it. Did you offer any explanation or just go, you know what, I'm in a bath, just deal with it?
Yeah, that was basically it. They're kind of like, where are you, coming from? And I'm like, well, I'm at an event. I'm in New York City, and the hotel has really horrible lighting and, that whole 9 yards. I think I had a Samson Q2U, but it's still going to be pretty boomy. But I did my best to keep it. I think if you go to School of Podcasting, I have a picture of that on my latest episode, because it was kind of a whole thing about sometimes you start with where you are. And in that case, I was like, well, I need Wi-Fi, and I need lighting, and I need a microphone and a laptop. And I was like, well, the only place I can find that has all those right now is the bathroom. So it's a picture of me sitting in the tub.
I'm going to check that out, because if you're listening to this episode on a podcast app that supports chapters, I do put chapters into each episode, and I'll try and grab a screenshot of that picture and upload it so we can see that. That sounds awesome. So, and this is another reason why hotels should have these middle shelf things for bathtubs, because you don't see them that often now.
No, you don't. That's why I was kind of like, oh, wow, this is cool. So, and it was a nice hotel. It was just they wanted to be kind of swanky and cool, and, just these little spotlights everywhere. And I'm like, yeah, I need like a big overhead light, and they just didn't have one. So,
well, that's the thing with video. It's a reason I only do pretty much audio only podcasts, is everything needs to be, bang on. So lighting is key, and I can never get lighting good. I'm either too bright, I'm too dark. I can never get it just so. So I'm 100% with you on that with the lighting. So there you go. If you need somewhere really simple to do your next work Zoom call, get to the bathroom. It's super comfortable and you can relax afterwards and pour yourself a nice hot one. Hey there, Danny here. This podcast will forever be free to listen to. But if you enjoy 5 Random Questions and get value from the show and want to support it, you can either do that with a donation of your choosing or as a monthly supporter with a 5 Random Questions membership. Choose your preference over at 5randomquestions.com/support. And now, back to this week's episode. Alrighty, let's have a look at question number 4. Okay, Dave, question 4. If your food is bad at a restaurant, would you say something?
That is a great question. I use this analogy a lot because if I really think about it, yeah, I'm not. I usually don't. I will just like, is it edible? Okay, it's fine, but I'm not coming back. In most cases, I'm not coming back. And that's where I always tell people with podcasts, I go, there are plenty of people like that. They listen to your show. This is their first impression. And, you know, if you're podcasting from the bathroom and it sounds like you're in a bathroom, they might not come back because they're like, this sounds horrible. So, yeah, I'm not usually, unless it's something that I go, ooh, wait, I didn't order this and I can't eat this. You know, I was at, I forget where was that. It was at some podcast event and they gave me somebody else's food. And it was a lot of times at restaurants, I stay very safe. Like, give me a burger or something that I know what I'm going to get. I don't want to experiment when I'm on the road. And so it was some sort of cuisine that I normally don't eat. So they gave me a plate. I'm like, oh, that's what this looks like. I've never had this before. And so I started eating it. And then it wasn't until like somebody brought this, they're like, wait, where's my stuff? And I go, well, wait a minute. That, like, I had fries. That's mine. And so I felt bad because I'd already half eaten somebody else's stuff. And I felt stupid. They're like, well, why did you eat it? I go, I didn't know what it looked like. This was the first time I've eaten this. So, and if it's something like that, I would then send it back because, like, I hate, for whatever reason, I was not born to eat mushrooms. And so if you throw mushrooms on something, I'm going to go, I didn't order this and I need those out of here for me to eat it.
Now, do you have anybody, if you have, say, regular dining companions, do you have anybody in your group that would speak up?
My ex-wife would. It used to be a thing where it always seemed like I don't know. I don't want to speak, ill of her because she's not here to defend herself, but I always got the feeling that, and I guess it is, when you go to a restaurant, you expect to have people do things to your liking. And if it was, medium and she wanted medium well, to me, I'm like, is there really that much of a difference? Yeah, this one's a little more pink, but she'd be like, nope, I'm sending it back. And I'm like, we're going to be here another 20 minutes while they kick your, nope, I paid money. I'm not eating that. And I was like, okay. So we ended up getting a lot of free steak. If we would go out we'd have date nights and I'm like, oh, here we go again, but yeah, but that's the person that will definitely send it back.
It's funny. My wife's grandma, she's very picky about her food, and she'll be the first. My wife and I are like you. We'll grumble at the table. We'll bitch and moan about the service and the food. But when the waiter or the waitress comes up and says, "How is everything?" we'll say, "Oh, fine, good." We'll never take the opportunity. But my wife's grandma, she is, she's a firecracker. So if she's got like little bits, so let's say they're seasoning a steak or something in the kitchen, and one little strand of a pepper. What's it? It's not a kernel, it's a peppercorn, I guess.
Yeah.
That strays onto her plate, she will notice it and she will complain about the whole meal because that one tiny little bit of peppercorn landed on her plate. So yeah, I hear you. I feel maybe my wife's grandma and your ex-wife would enjoy dinner together.
Yeah. Well, I worked in a restaurant. I was a waiter putting myself through college. So maybe I know, most of the time these people are doing the best they can and they're trying to get it out to you as fast as they can. And, sometimes, I don't know. So the only time I always raise my eyebrow is if I'm with somebody who's going to show me their awesome memory. And I'm like, yeah, I want this with this, but not that. And be sure to put this on the side and blah, blah, blah. And they're not writing anything down. That's where I'm always like, okay, if you get this wrong, I'm sending it back because that's just stupid. So.
And that seems to be a lot more popular now. Like if we go out eating, I can't remember the last time someone's actually had a physical notepad or even an iPad or something like that.
Yeah.
To take the items off the menu, check it through. They'll just memorize it. And you think you're dealing with, let's say, 10 tables and 30, 40 people. And you're just, it doesn't drive me crazy. It just drives me mad thinking about the mental capacity you must have to remember all that. Because I'm sure they must get some wrong, but it generally seems that they don't get a lot wrong.
Yeah, it's a skill, I guess. The more you do it, the better you get at it. But I'm always like, you could make this a whole lot easier on yourself if you just wrote it down. But, I guess it's cool or something. Who knows? Maybe it's part of the entertainment of the evening. Like, you're waiting to see, are they going to get my food right? But I don't want to, that's not something I want to put into, to leave up to chance.
Well, and if you go back to Niagara, just on a slight tangent, but if you find yourself back in Niagara on the Canadian side, go to a restaurant called Remington's, which is on like the main strip, I guess. And that's a steak and seafood restaurant, like some of the best steak you'll ever have. But they have singing waiters and waitresses. So they'll wander about and they'll serenade you while you're eating. Sometimes it's fun. Other times, maybe not so much when you just want to have a quiet meal when someone's there belting out Celine Dion or something.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah.
Really good food. It's up to you whether you want to sing it or not. So just a quick warning there. So Dave, we're almost at the end here. We've flown through that. This has been amazing so far. So how are we doing for coming up for question number 5? We're ready to take this one home?
I'm ready to take this one home, my friend.
All righty, let's have a look. Okay, Dave, I like this one. Question 5. What's the best on-screen bromance?
Oh, I didn't think about that. The first one that came to my mind, and it's due to awesome Amazon marketing, is Will Smith and the Martin Lawrence. They have a new, I can't remember even what the chain's called. It's the one, they're cops.
Oh, the Bad Boys?
Bad Boys, yeah. And when I think of bromance, that's the first thing that popped in my head. I'm sure later I might come up with some other ones, but both those guys are pretty entertaining. So I think right now that would be at least the only one I can think of at the moment. So
it's funny how a lot of the cop kind of shows and movies and that always have that bromance. I think of, say, Lethal Weapon, for example, with Mel Gibson and Danny Glover. That's a nice sort of banter going on there. But I've really been enjoying. I'm going to watch the new Deadpool and Wolverine movie this weekend, and all the press junkets and the marketing that's been put out around that movie. It genuinely seems that Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman have a lot of love and respect for each other. It's not just two actors, doing the marketing. It seems that they've got off-screen romance as well going on there.
Yeah, I just saw them on Hot Ones, that YouTube channel. And they're both just trying to get through this where they're eating these really hot wings and things like that. And at one point, one of the questions was, say something nice about each other and then say something you wish they would change. And it was, I'm with you. I think those two really especially appreciate each other because they're similar, but they're apparently have things that they're a little different on. And that's another great bromance.
I watched that episode actually on Thursday, maybe just after it came out. And there was one, like what Hugh Jackman said about Ryan Reynolds was so sweet and really nice about his family and how he loves his kids, etc. But some of the stuff coming out of Ryan Reynolds' mouth, it's Ryan Reynolds, that's his persona. But when he says, he wants to mouth sex a volcano when he's trying to describe what the wing heat was like.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, that makes sense. I love that show, by the way. Hot Ones, First We Feast, amazing. Well,
the amazing thing about that was how many times both Ryan and Hugh both said, "Oh man, that's a real," like it was so obvious that the host had really done his job on researching. Like he was asking Hugh Jackman about being a clown. And I guess he used to be like a birthday clown, and I never knew that. So they did their research, and multiple times both those guys are like, "Oh man, that's a question." So that's half the reason why I like watching that show, is because he does do interviews that are completely different. So, and everybody wants to know, Danny, is it a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the movie? Because I was thinking about going to see that.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to see it tonight.
Okay.
So after we finish recording, I'm going to spend some time at the lake. We're very fortunate where we live. There's a lake about a 50-minute walk away from us. Because I went for a long walk last night. I've got some blisters on my feet. Not smart. So I'm just going to relax in the lake and do that. But yeah, tonight. So I will make sure to give you the thumbs up or thumbs down. But by all accounts, everybody's got the thumbs up for that.
Yeah. It'd be hard to mess that up. you got two great actors, and yeah. So
Exactly. Now, would you do the hot wings challenge? Do you like hot food at all? Would you do that?
no, I don't like painful food in general. In fact, even just going to a Mexican restaurant, I'm always like, okay, what's like, I'm like honey barbecue, like, you know what I mean? Like when we started getting the hot stuff, I'm like, that's just not my jam. I'll like it sweet and tangy and things like that. But when it starts like making my eyes water or things like that, I'm like, yeah, that's enough of that.
So there you go, Sean Evans. If you ever listen to this episode, which I'm sure you will somewhere down the line, Dave Jackson will send your wings back. He'll speak up and he'll say, nope, not for me.
That's it.
So Dave, we're at the end of the questions. That's amazing, but I really appreciate that. In fairness to each guest, I do throw it over to you to ask a random question of me. I've put you on the spot for the last half hour or so. So in all fairness, it's only good that you can ask your own question too. So over to you, good sir.
Okay, so as a dumb American, I know you're Scottish, but some dumb Americans might think you're Irish. And so my question is, if somebody goes, oh, what part of Ireland are you from? Is that offensive to call a Scottish person an Irish person?
It's not, because they do share, I say they, see I'm speaking in third person already, even though I'm Scottish. We do share a very similar dialect and similar accent, I feel. And that comes back from the Celts and the Picts back 800 years ago, whenever it was, when the Scots went over to Ireland and vice versa. So I feel we share a lot of commonalities that way, especially accent. The best I've had is... Cause my accent can be all over the place at times. And funnily enough, on the episode that just dropped this week, as we record this, the episode with Freddie Cruz, we mentioned during the episode that my accent can be a bit hit and miss, because I'm from Scotland, but I moved away from Scotland when I was 21, and I lived and worked in England for 15 years, 20 years maybe. During that time, though, I also spent 6 months in Australia backpacking and just doing the whole thing over there. And then I moved to Canada in 2006. I've almost been here 20 years. So you throw all that together, and I never really had the strongest Scottish accents to start with. I went to a particular school in Edinburgh called George Heriot's, and I was fortunate. I got a kind of bursary, I guess, to go there, because it's a private school, super expensive, and I was fortunate to get a bursary there. And that kind of had to make me change the way I speak a little bit, because it's very proper, very blah, blah. And I found since then, I've had a softer accent. So that's a long-winded way of saying, no offense there. If you say to me, what part of England are you from? Now, that's a different conversation. But that goes back to the whole Scotland, England, hatred, blah, 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 strong word, etc.
Excellent. All right. Well, good to know, because I always, I love accents. Like I know Colin Gray that's one where I'm like, I don't know, could be Irish, could be Scottish. It's one of those two. And I always wonder, like, is it offensive if I, ask that question? So I'm glad to hear that if I ever want to know, I can ask somebody, not worry about getting clocked in the face.
Yeah, or get a Glasgow kiss. And Colin's got a very strong accent anyway, or much stronger than me for sure. So yeah, it is, yeah, Scots and Irish, pretty similar. Welsh, completely different. And then, English, I can see that for sure. But yeah, that's a good question, buddy.
All right. Score one for Dave.
Score one for Dave. So Dave, we've reached the end of the episode. For people that want to check out the School of Podcasting and all the awesome stuff you do, as well as Podpage, now that we can mention this, the episode is now cleared the NDA date, so we'll be okay to mention that. Where's the best place for people to connect with you online and check out all the awesome stuff you do?
Yeah, I mean, you can always go to schoolofpodcasting.com, but I do more than that. So if you want to check that out, I have a website at powerofpodcasting.com, which is just your typical Linktree kind of thing that shows you can get my book there and all my other shows. So either one of those are kind of my home where you can find out what I'm doing.
And I'll be sure to drop that in the show notes. So whatever app you're listening on, be sure to check them out, and I'll link straight over to Dave. So again, Dave, I appreciate your time today, and good luck with the new position at Podpage.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Always great hanging out with you.
Thanks for listening to 5 Random Questions. If you enjoyed this week's episode, be sure to follow for free on the app you're currently listening on, or online at 5randomquestions.com. And if you feel like leaving a review, well, that would make me happier than that time I realised podcasting could be an audio-only format, saving countless eyeballs from having to see the face behind the voice. It's not pretty. But seriously, if you want to leave a review, you can do that at 5randomquestions.com/review. It would make my day. Until the next time, keep asking those questions.